In the last film, I showed you how to play around with perspective when you're urban sketching, and we did this sketch of Amsterdam and move the perspective all around. And then I came across this gorgeous picture from Reham _M_A on Instagram, and she had posted this brilliant picture from somewhere in Turkey, I'm not sure where, and invited people to sketch it in their own style and share it. And I loved the perspective because it's going right in. It's a really low shot looking up so that we've got that perspective going in there and we've got these lines. And I thought, oh yes, well, let's use that. So I'm going to use my ring binder again, and this is cartridge paper, which if you're American, you'll think, what on earth is that? It is simply good quality drawing paper. So it can take a bit of a watercolour wash, but not too many. If you want to know how to make this ring binder, I've got a film about it, and it's lovely because you can have all the papers you love in one sketch pad. So I've got watercolour paper, tinted watercolour paper, cartridge paper, and so forth. And of course, you can always swap things out, put things in, and get rid of the evidence if you do an awful picture. Whether you're sketching in your studio from photos like we are here, or whether you're out in real life doing proper urban sketching, sitting on the corner here, sketching as people go past, I think it's often just a good idea to scribble a few ideas down and just work out what's important to you before you begin. How's it going to fit on the paper? Just look at some of the shapes and sizes, what you want to leave out, what you want to put in, what might be important and what might not. So that's what I've done here. I've done a really scribbly sketch, and I know, for example, I will leave this out. I've spotted that this tree might be really handy for cutting out and throwing the building forward. I have spotted that rather nice lamppost. I'm a bit fond of a lamppost, and I was thinking, do you know what? It'd be rather nice if there was another one up here. And then I spotted there is one, but it's hidden. So I may well bring another lamppost up here. There is a tree here. I'm not sure what I will do, whether I might just put a few buildings there or bring that tree in. I'm a little concerned that if I do a tree here and a tree there, it's all a bit matchy-matchy. From this photo, because it's not very high res, it's really hard to see what's going on here. So I'm just going to do it as steps, and I am going to leave out the people, this person hoiking her suitcase up the hill. This lady, I think, is sitting and selling stuff. I don't know, it's too confusing for me, so I'm leaving that out. What I also love are these sort of leading lines as we go up the hill. I think that's really important. And then we've got these ones sort of going down the hill. 5 minutes of sketching just gives me a few ideas to be going on with. And then once you are happy with what you're going to do, then we can start sketching in our actual book, having hopefully learned a little as we went along there. Now I've got these pens. These are water soluble, just in a grey. They're basically a cheap version of Tombow. They're from WH Smith's, and they are considerably cheaper than Tombow. So, you know, I'm not saying they're better, just cheaper. And I think it's great to go in and sketch with a pen straight away, because it makes you more committed. Yeah, the temptation, if you use a pencil, is to rub out, and you just keep on, you know, you put your line in, it's wrong, you rub it out, da 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 da, and then by the time you actually get your sort of sketch in place, you've probably lost the will to live. Your paper is all scuffed up and horrible, and yeah, you just pack up and go home. If you use a pen, you're more committed to your line. This is water soluble, so as soon as we put any watercolour on top of it, it's all going to disappear anyway, and it's a lot quicker. I'm holding it quite loosely so I can just get those lines in, just make sure I've got some angles right. If you're not sure about an angle, always just feel it. So have I got that right? I'm not sure. I haven't got that right. I think it does splay out a bit more. As always, really annoying. You tend to get things far better on your scribbly sketch than you do on your real one. My road, that goes there, that goes off there. I think that's probably enough of angles that I'm happy about. I love this building here because it's like, I don't know, I just imagine the family that lived here. Oh, I don't know, the youngest son was moaning about not having enough space in his bedroom or something. Oh, we'll make you a bigger bedroom, and they couldn't, so they just had to extend it and sort of put little supports on. We could do that in our house, that'd be rather good. So I really love that sticky out bit. So let's look at the windows. The other good thing about using this pen is that you can put your construction lines in for your perspective, because the perspective on this is very kind of odd, but you could put those lines in and they will dissolve away, or indeed you could put those lines in and keep them and make them very much part of your image. You know, that's your choice. I'm just putting windows in, or rough indication, not because I believe you've got to have exactly the right number of windows and all that sort of stuff. I just want to make sure everything is going to fit. See what I say about, yeah, those are construction lines, so that will just give me the bottom of those windows. Again, I don't think I've got that angle right at all, but I'm going to leave that, I think. So I think that is a steeper angle. That definitely is. But I think I will leave it as it is, because to me it actually looks plausible, and it's not my favourite angle, to be honest. This sort of looky uppy feels a bit like someone's looking up someone's skirt when they're this low down. So it's actually a really good exercise for me to have an angle that I would not naturally choose. Just going to put that lovely lamppost in, and not forget about putting lamppost in up here. Right, the one thing that I was struggling with were these steps, so let's just make sure, as I say, they're not terribly clear what's going on. Something like that. Once you're happy with the sketch, that was done with our water soluble pens and can all disappear off, and now we need to firm up lines. And I like to use waterproof fine liner pens. So these are black, these are just disposable pens. It's got pigment ink in it, so it's waterproof and it's fade resistant, and they come in all different widths from, well, here I've got a 0.7, 0.2, 0.3, and they even go down to a 0.05 as a very fine one If you're only getting a few, I would get something like a 0.3 and a 0.5, maybe a 0.1, something so you've got a little bit of range, because it's nice sometimes to have thicker lines coming towards you. It just brings the foreground forward, and thinner lines can be further away. So I'm going to choose a 0.3. And now I need to firm up some of these lines. I'm not just going to cover and draw around the lines I've already got. I am going to keep looking and measuring and making sure that I'm happy with the lines that are on the paper, and try and keep them quite loose. This is a nice time, if you want to, you might exaggerate some of the angles. You're always looking and observing and trying to work out what's going on. So I've just slightly exaggerated. I can see that it looks like there's a bit of a dish in that roof. It's such a quirky building that to exaggerate that angle doesn't seem like a bad thing to me. This, I don't know what that is. It's probably a solar panel. I don't know. Anyway, so I'm going to say try and keep these lines pretty loose still. So just be aware of how you're holding the pen. Don't grip it as if your life depends on it. Try to hold it relatively loosely, maybe a little further down the barrel than you would if you were writing. You don't need to have that sort of level of control and grip on it. It's probably a good idea to get big shapes in first. I'm going to work out from this central building, because the danger is that if you say did this then came over here, you'd find that it didn't meet up somewhere here. So it's no bad thing to start from the center and carry out and measure everything relative to that center. Now if you do a wrong line, you heard me go whoops, don't panic, just put the right one in, because no one will notice, I promise. So there's some sort of shop with I think it's a sort of folded up awning, that yellow bit there. I think, yeah, that's a better angle. Oh, I've possibly gone a little over the top with that angle. I was just concerned I hadn't quite got the angles right on. So I did on my initial sketch, but on this one, not so much. And people get quite caught up on the rules of perspective and so forth. And I mean, I have got a film all about 1 and 2 point perspective. So if you're particularly interested in that, I'll put a link in the description. But you're not going to go far wrong if you just draw what you see. Don't kind of get creative. If you can see it sloping one way, don't sort of think, oh, I'm sure it should be sloping the other way. If it's sloping that way, that is the way it's sloping. Okay, I think that's a better angle. So that just goes to prove my point about not going over your initial lines and just double checking and making sure that they are right. So observation is absolutely key. Right, so I've mapped in the biggest shapes. Now we can start. Oh, look at that wonderful drain pipe. Oh, you can get really excited by drain pipes. Anyway, so I am going to put in the main windows. Again, I'm not going to get too hung up. But I am looking at this point just at their sash windows. So, you know, that seems quite an important feature of the house. Just looking at this window, it's kind of interesting to see where they line up. So it's the bottom of that is almost at the same level as there. So take your cue and clues from the surrounding buildings. Door. So I've got these going in the wrong direction. It should be that way. Is that funny? How you just can do something and just get it wrong. And I usually say my perspective's pretty good, but there you go. So you do have to just challenge yourself and give yourself a reality check. You know, does it look right? Is it consistent? What on earth are you doing? That sort of question. And it will just make sure that, you know, you don't get to the end and look at something the next day when it suddenly becomes blindingly obvious and you're like, whoops. Again, I don't think I've got enough windows in these buildings. Does that matter? Well, no, not at all. Because what it is, we're trying to get the feel of this amazing higgledy-piggledy building, and that's far more important than whether there are 5 windows or 4 windows or more satellite dishes there just to warm the cockles of my heart. There's a couple there. I have mapped in with my waterproof pen most of the important bits. I can now either refine them, haven't done that window, or I could actually go in with colour. So if you're the sort of person who is always tempted to colour in your drawing and stay within the lines and do those sorts of things, I would suggest getting colour on really early. If on the other hand that's not your particular temptation, and you know that's not something that you're particularly worried about, then you can just do that later and get colour on after you've maybe done a bit more detail, and you could sort of get the drawing looking halfway decent before you do that. Just be aware that you will need to dry the colour before you go and put any extra pen on top. So if we were sitting here in Turkey, that wouldn't be an issue at all because it would dry within minutes. It's probably gorgeous and hot and it would dry actually too soon and you'd be really annoyed because you couldn't get the paint to move around. If it's cold where you are, then it may take longer to dry and you might need to just manage that. Think, oh, I'll do more pen work because then I'll be ready for a cup of tea. I'll get the paint on just before I go and find somewhere for a coffee or a cup of tea or whatever. So be aware of that. I'm going to do some more pen work before I get my colour on, simply because I want it to look less rough before I stop. Having mapped in those lines, I'm coming back in and I'm going to start looking in greater detail. So for example, I'm going to actually make the drain pipe not a line, I'm going to make it a pipe. I am going to look that I can see the edges of those windows, and I'm going to make those a bit bigger, and you will find as you look at a scene or a photo or whatever you're drawing from, you will start to see more and more. So it really is the case of the more you look, the more you see. And you'll suddenly think, oh, I didn't realise there was whatever there. How did I not see that originally? And you just don't, because you kind of glance and you don't see what's going on. These ones down the bottom have got bars on them. So that might be quite fun to make a feature of. Got a nice dark shadow around that door frame or in that door frame, and then we've got the door, and it looks like that's got sort of wrought iron as well over it, like that. Got this great wiring. I do love a bit of dodgy wiring. Well, it looks dodgy to my eyes. I'm sure it's perfectly safe, but it's just different from the sort of wiring that you would see at home. It's all sort of, so that comes up there and then it sort of disappears down into the road. And obviously, as they get further away, we don't need to have as much detail, or well, when we absolutely can't see as much. I think it's a good idea to try and develop the picture as a whole. So not say get caught up in doing every plank here and finish this to a huge detail, because frankly you might get fed up with it and then you think, oh, I've finished all that, but I really can't be bothered with this. So I think it's usually a good idea to develop the picture to a similar amount of finish. So this is a sort of some sort of shutter or roller. I like it because the little splash of colour is going to be great. I love the yellow that's dotted around, and that's given me all sorts of ideas in terms of what I'll actually do. This is all quite dark in here. I'm guessing there's something going on there. I think it'd be quite fun to get some of that sticking out again. Let's just start getting in little of those leading lines, because these are going to be great for saying that you're going uphill. Need time to get paint on. So as I mentioned before, I'm working on cartridge paper, so it's not going to take a huge amount of water, so I need to be careful with that. Also, if you were sitting outside, you're not going to have an enormous range of paints with you. So I'm going to keep this simple as well. I've got some yellow, that's quinacridone gold. I've got French ultramarine. I've got a bit of burnt sienna and some cadmium red. I've mixed a bit of the burnt sienna and French ultramarine to make a bit of a grey there. Usually I'll let the colours just mix on the surface, but I thought it might be handy to have that. And then you've just got to kind of go in and let the colours do their thing. So I'm going to come in here. I do want to try and leave a bit of that drain pipe showing because it is so gorgeous. And I'm just going to let those colours dance and move on the surface. I'm going to let those merge and mingle. I thought this primary palette would be kind of fun. Do want somewhat more specifically that lovely yellow shutter, and then maybe some of that red coming down there a little more strongly. And I'm going to go for some of that grey coming through there. And should that go there, I would not be upset. Now, oops, I wanted that to be blue rather than grey. So I'm going to come down here. Now, the thought, do we want a blue sky? Or will it be obvious that the sky is blue? I'm not sure. Definitely want that to be white and that to pick up the white. Yeah, I'm going to leave the sky white. I don't often, well, quite often I end up with a yellow sky, to be honest. So we know the sun is coming this side, so I want to make sure that I leave areas of white. That might be in shade. Let some of that blue come in. And let some of this come in. Some of that can go down there. And then we've got this lovely yellow. Ooh, way too yellow. We can dilute it on the paper, but just making sure that, to say, we do let there be little areas of white showing through. Now, I've made that really dark, even by my standards. So I can just grab a bit of tissue. And if you didn't have tissue, well, you'd end up wiping it on your leg of your jeans or whatever you were wearing, wouldn't you? Now, we've got the tree there. I'd like maybe some red, just the tiniest. Just pull that side over. We've got some tree going on. I know trees are not blue. Want to make sure we keep that there. But let's drop the yellow in and let it mix on the paper. And then we've got something that's a lot more exciting than if we'd mixed a green and painted that tree. Oh, I'm quite liking that. That's very bright again. Yeah, funnily enough, my colour palette matches the binding rings on my sketchbook, and I don't know, I do find myself being influenced by the colours around me. It's so funny. It happens time and time again. I think I am emphasising the blue elsewhere because I'm not going to put that blue sky in. And I think I will emphasise the blue elsewhere. So subliminally, if that's the right word, we will feel that there is blue going on here. So I'm splattering a bit because that always loosens things up, and it also helps your eye travel round the whole composition. I think this will be fun to bring this corner towards us. So I really have let that paint wiggle and enjoy the surface. I've left lots of white gaps. I can always go back in and put more paint in, but what I can't do is take the paint away. So it's far better to do too little than too much. Sadly, I need to let that dry. Sadly, I'm not sitting in Turkey, so this is going to take a while, but we'll come back when it's dry. You can check by feeling with the back of your hand. If it feels cool, there's water in the paper, so you need to dry it more, because you'll find pens just won't work on top of the wet. And we're going to go back to our water-soluble pens here, because these are great. They are dual tipped, so I've got a brush pen one end and the bullet nib that we use for the initial drawing the other. And it's a absolutely fabulous way of adding tone when you're urban sketching without adding yet more water to your piece, because you're always about trying to manage whether things are wet or dry when you're out and about. And if you've got something like this, well, you can do that, I say, without adding any extra water and having to wait yet again for it to dry. So it's a way of adding shadow and tone. Now we know the light's coming here, this side is darker, so I can start to darken here. I do it a little bit gradually. I don't want to sort of go black dark this side, and just work up to it. So I'm using one of the mid-tones to put a bit of shadow in. If I don't think that's dark enough, I could go in with a slightly darker one. We've got that sort of revere there, and I think under here is darker, isn't it? Because that was the you know, the overhang. That side would be capturing a bit of the light, and then this is dark in here, isn't it? So we can make that darker. I don't want to cover that though, because I rather like what was going on there. That's darker there. We've got that darker here. That's so I don't want to go too dark, but you see how easy it is just to create windows or create a little area of shadow, like under the balcony, and then say using a different grey we can get that window in. Make that darker here. You can build it up in layers. These are transparent, so you can build them up in layers, and that's rather cool. And they also blend, so you can use them to sort of blend each other. Now, where I accidentally put that in, the outline of a window that just didn't exist. Oops, if I had some clean water, that'd be even better. I could just get rid of it because they are water-soluble pens. So if that was upsetting you, don't be upset. Just get rid of those wrong lines if they were annoying you. And again, it's just a good idea to develop everything to the same level rather than finishing this half of it and then thinking, oh, I'm a bit fed up now, I don't really want to come back and do this. So get it all to a similar level of finish. That's overhang, so that needs to be in the shadow. That is really quite dark under there. So we've got that on, we've got the colour on, we've just toned some of the things down if they were sort of looking a little bit busy. Go back into a waterproof pen and start to work in a little bit more detail. So I've gone for a 0.05 for some of this far away stuff. So I'm just going to start, say, putting a little more detail here. Say with the tree, I might just do some scribbly marks to give the impression of some foliage going on. Not all over, just where it's darker. Door frames, window frames, and so forth. I think we need a thicker pen as it comes towards us. We can put the bits holding the guttering up. There's wires across there. I like to make the window panes all a little bit different, just because windows are sort of like the eyes of a building, and they sort of blink and wink at you, so it's nice to get some life into them. Do more sort of block work here because I want to differentiate the bottom from the top. So this is, we decided, was block. You might find these pens don't always go on top of the paint that easily, almost like it blocks the nib at some point. If so, either grab a different pen or just sort of scribble until it clears the nib. Won't damage it as such, but if the paint is still a little bit damp, you might find it's hard to work on top. I think I said it's far better to do things gradually, because you can always darken it further, but you can't lighten it. So yeah, that just curves it round a bit. And ditto, this should be a bit darker. Okay, let's start working. Now this is quite small block paving, and it could take forever if I did it all as blocks, but I think what I will do is just work with some of the marks I've got here to create sort of the general feeling of the blocks, but on a far larger scale. I think that would be better. They'd obviously get smaller the further away they were. It can be quite fun to actually work with the, say, the marks that you've got from the watercolour. So I'm going to outline some of these blobs, maybe add some more pen ones. So I've got the splatter here. We could look like little stones and things on the road. Slightly thicker pen. This is a 0.7 because this is right at the front, so we can do that. If we want to, we can also hatch rather than just using the grey markers. Create a different mark and a different feel to certain areas. Because this building is closest to us, I might want to just put a little bit more effort and detail into it than the others, just again to bring it forward, because obviously closer to us you'll see more detail. So I'm going over the windows, I'm hatching in some bits, just emphasising others. I have a confession to make. I drew this yesterday, and when I looked at it this morning, I came into the studio and looked at it this morning and thought, do you know what? It really does need a bit of sky just to show off those lovely angles. And I carefully splooshed some yellow onto it and then thought, oh no, I didn't film that. So apologies. But to finish this off, I say, I thought that sky would really help. And then just to tie it down, I put a tiny little wash here. I am fond of a yellow sky. I have no idea why, but I think that just finishes it and transports me to Turkey, to that quirky, gorgeous house.